Okay, we're good.
Welcome, everyone. Women's and Children's is very happy to have you with us on our first webinar in the month of October to recognize domestic violence. Yearly, this is done. I know there are many awarenesses on a daily basis, a monthly basis. So I appreciate you. You all have your reason for being here, and we thank you. During this pandemic, it's been very hard for domestic violence agencies to reach out to our clients, to all people that need our services in various capacities because of the lockdown. But it's especially hard for our people that are in controlling relationships because now they're really trapped with their controller or abuser at home. Already, isolation has always been a tactic that's used by controllers. So now that isolation is increased, we know that domestic violence increases as time goes on. And now I'm sure that the control that is being used in these homes are even more extensive and probably in different ways. So I welcome you here for whatever reason you're here for, whether it's for yourself, somebody else, or you want to know how you can help others, whether it's at work or in home life, wherever. So again, first thing I want to talk about is the terminology. Um, you hear the word domestic violence a lot. I have a tendency of using controlling relationships because that is something that people from all walks of life can relate to. Very often, the word violence denotes physical abuse. But controlling relationships, that is something that can resonate with people. Put it down to something they can understand and use and invest in. We also use intimate partner violence. You will hear me say interchangeably abuse, controlling relations, intimate partner. So I just wanted to bring that recognition. The next thing I want to talk about, which has always been something very revealing to me, is perceptions. We have all come to this webinar with our thoughts, our ideas, with our perceptions coloring how we feel about domestic violence. The thing about perceptions is it can, depending on your perspective, it can be a barrier. So I'm asking you to be open-minded, to be open-minded to the awarenesses that's going on. It doesn't mean that your perception is wrong. I'm just asking that this is a time that we open our perceptions, that we're open to the news and learn. Um, if I had an imaginary box right now, I would ask you to put those perceptions in that box. And then after the meeting, you can take the perceptions back or you can modify them, do whatever you want with them. just sometimes we become so rigid in our perceptions, we block our growth, we block our outreach to others. It's like values. Many people, our clients, will come to us, and one of the first things, of course, to see if the client is safe. But the other thing is to check what their values are about relationships and other facets of life because it paints a picture for us. But where they're coming from and how we can bring awareness is or respect their values and relate better to them. But the other aspect of that is sometimes we're so, again, I use the word rigid, in keeping those values about what we think a relationship should be, um, or in other ways that we don't think we can change the value. But times change. So it is possible if that is something a person chooses to do. So again, thank you, and let's all do the best we can. Patty is going to share some history with us about domestic violence. History paints a picture of how people and society behave. When we look at history, it gives us data and events along the journey of how laws were created and why. So my name is Beverly Sorensen. I've been an advocate for 20-some years. My coworker Patty is going to explain her role, and then she will talk about the history. Thank you.
I'm Patty Gonzalez. I am a sexual assault and domestic violence advocate counselor at Women and Children's Horizons in Kenosha. I've been doing domestic violence counseling for over 25 years and received my master's degree from Loyola University. The response for domestic violence and sexual assault recently has been tremendous, and I'm glad we have these services for women and children out there to get the help that they need. What I'm going to talk about in the next segment is the history of domestic violence, and I hope everyone can take something away from this presentation. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the PowerPoint.
Hi, my name is Patty Gonzalez with Women and Children's Horizons, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I am a sexual assault and domestic violence counselor. During Domestic Violence Month, a few of us will be talking about different scenarios of domestic violence. Today, I will be discussing the history of domestic violence. Stay tuned. The history of domestic violence. Domestic violence is not a new phenomenon by any means. In fact, violence within families has existed since the beginning of recorded history. As far back as we have records, we find evidence of violence occurring against family members, especially wives and children. Even more troubling is the fact that laws throughout history often ignore or even support this kind of violence. In modern times, we have become far less tolerant of domestic violence in our laws as well as our attitudes. However, as a society, we are still burdened with hundreds of years of unfortunate attitudes towards this occurrence. In many belief systems that persist in contemporary American culture, we can find troubling attitudes about family relations and violence. These are a warning to us that the conditions leading to domestic violence are still alive and well in our culture. Even more alarming are the statistics. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence reports that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been the victims of violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. Intimate partners abuse people at a rate of about 20 per minute on average. A troubling study in 2012 found that in the years between 2008 and 2012, the number of women murdered by intimate partners was more than the number of soldiers killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined during the same period. We have seen many social cultural changes throughout history. It is possible that these changes have left the pervasive problem of domestic violence untouched. How much has changed? From End Domestic Abuse Wisconsin, about the annual Wisconsin Domestic Violence Homicide Report. Releasing our annual Wisconsin Domestic Violence Homicide Report is a sobering reminder of how often domestic violence results in a tragic outcome. Our intention with producing this report each year is twofold: to honor the lives of victims of domestic violence, homicide in Wisconsin, and to catalyze improvements in systemic, and community responses to domestic violence. In 2019, there were 72 lives lost in Wisconsin due to domestic violence. This figure includes 52 homicide victims, 18 perpetrator suicides after they committed a homicide, and 2 perpetrators killed by responding law enforcement. This edition of our homicide report includes a section that analyzes data elements from our 20 years of collecting domestic violence homicide information at End Domestic Abuse Wisconsin. The review of our 20 years of data indicated that in at least 57% of the homicide incidents, prior domestic violence was a precipitating factor. Additionally, from 2000 to 2019, a victim leaving an intimate partner relationship preceded at least 42% of the cases we identified. These percentages underscore that we still have work to do in Wisconsin communities to support people who are currently experiencing domestic violence by directing them to individualized crisis intervention and support before the abuse escalates. Furthermore, victims of domestic violence should be made aware of the risk involved in the decision to leave an abusive relationship and have access to all relevant resources, support, and services needed to ensure they have a personalized safety net at that critical point in time. The history of domestic violence, historical, national, and global context, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, from 1980 to 2005, intimate partner homicides declined by 44%, and homicides among other family members decreased by 26%. Similarly, non-fatal domestic violence decreased by about 63% from 1994 to 2010. Yet the decline has varied significantly for different populations. The data indicate that between 1976 to 2005, the number of Black males killed by intimates dropped by 83%, white males by 61%, Black females by 52%, and white females by 6%. This downward trend has been attributed to increased awareness, services, and intervention. One in 2017, the Centers for Disease Control released an analysis on the prevalence and circumstances surrounding female homicide deaths in the United States. Their study analyzed the deaths of 10,018 women from 18 states between the years 2003 and 2014 by looking at data from the National Violent Death Reporting System. In addition to the finding that over half of female homicides in the U.S. are intimate partner violence, IPV, related and perpetrated with a firearm, the study found that non-Hispanic, Black, and American Indian, Alaska Native women are killed at nearly 3 times the rate of non-Hispanic white women. Despite the aforementioned downward trend of the number of homicides, disparities in the number of victims of certain racial and ethnic groups still persist. On a global level, a systematic review published in The Lancet in 2013 reported that 1 in 7 homicides overall are committed by an intimate partner. Though domestic violence homicide victims are both males and females, the latter experience higher risk and mortality. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime issued a report in 2019 titled Global Study on Homicide, Gender-Related Killing of Women and Girls, which provides insights into the issue of femicide on a worldwide scale. They report that 58% of women who were killed intentionally in 2017 were killed by their intimate partner or a family member. This equals approximately 50,000 women globally who were victims of domestic violence homicide in 2017, which rose from 48,000 in 2012. An executive summary since 2000, End Domestic Abuse Wisconsin has chronicled deaths due to domestic violence in our state. In 2019, individuals died in Wisconsin due to domestic violence at a rate of 1 death every 5 days. The basic findings contained in this report are outlined below. In 2019 compared to 2018, all domestic violence related homicide deaths. In 2019, 53 was the count. In 2018, 39 was the count. Incidents of domestic violence homicide. In 2019, the number was 48. 2018, 37. Victims of domestic violence homicide excluding by legal intervention. In 2019, 52. 2018, 38. Homicides by legal intervention, responding law enforcement. In 2019, 1. In 2018, 1. Perpetrator suicide, excluding by legal intervention. In 2019, 18. 2018, 7. Attempted homicide incidents with perpetrator suicide. 2019, 1. 2018, 1. Total deaths, victim and perpetrator. In 2019, 72. In 2018, 47. When victims of domestic violence, male and female, were asked where they would go for assistance, they responded as follows. Would seek help from the police, 31.2%. Did not know, 27.7%. Would go to a hospital, 14.7%. Would approach a family member, 10.7%. Would go to a shelter, 10.7%. Or would forego assistance and simply retaliate, 3.1%. Women who are abused seek medical attention more so than those who are not victimized. A study in the Northwest found that 95% of women in diagnosed domestic violence sought care 5 or more times per year, than that 27% sought medical care more than 20 times per year. Often these women go to the emergency department or ER.
Thank you, Patty. That was very eye-opening, and it's been a long journey, and it's not over yet. So we have violence in the home, and we have violence in the world and community right now. I think it's important that we learn about domestic violence. Can you ask yourself, and I'm not saying that this is, but I'm putting the question forward. Do you see a correlation between some of the violence out in the world right now? And can it be stemming from our home life? Are we living in a healthy relationship or a troublesome relationship? I just posed the question. Everyone out there right now, it's like this person is on that side and this person is on that side. Again, this is all about perceptions and, of course, other avenues. But that's why I said, please, let us be open. So let us carry on. Thank you very much, Patty. Domestic violence, that's a controlling relationship. Domestic violence refers to a pattern. It's not a one-time event. It can be, but usually there is a pattern. It's about maintaining power and control over another person because they don't see the other individual as an equal. They see them there to get their bidding done, their dreams. They're not going to say, honey, what's your dreams? I'm going to support. There's not equality in the relationship. It's you want to further your education, get a job, whatever. Well, they may say that, but they will find ways to sabotage that. Because if they feel that their partner is bettering themselves or out, the isolation has been broken, and maybe they're going to share, find out that their home life is not a so-called normal relationship. Many people in controlling relationships, and I say many, not all, may have been in a family of origin when it was unhealthy. And because they're isolated, they can't go into extracurricular activities, etc., etc. They have nothing to compare it to. So they may want to leave the house early, and they might gravitate to somebody that may be like the abusive parent or whoever it is in the family of origin. So domestic violence, yes, it can happen. Intimate partner violence can happen through dating relationships, current spouse, past spouse. But I like to think of it like as in a dating relationship. I like to think about it as a relationship that is not equal. It's about power and control. Many of our clients, they look at their relationship. There is something they had been attracted to, and they tend to remember the good times. They might be upset, but there's a lot of dynamics that is involved in that we'll talk about. So it's not about love. It's about power and control. It's not marital conflict, mutual abuse, a lover's quarrel, or a private family matter. Domestic violence is pervasive, life-threatening crime that affects millions of individuals across the United States, as Patty has also indicated. When I talk about my older clients, I often talk to them also about caregiver abuse. So I'm opening the doors to say that when you're in a trusted relationship and that trust has been broken, in their case with caregivers or whatever it may be, so that they can also relate because it's true. Okay. Thank you. The power and control. Well, years ago, there was a group of women in the support group. They got together and they started talking about their individual situations. So they talked about the dynamics, they talked about this, they talked about that, and they recognized a pattern. I think the power and control wheel is important because in the middle is the goal of abuse, and then the spokes are the tactics that are used. So once they noted that, they thought, wow, our controllers, they come from all the same school. That's because domestic violence is a learned behavior. Another reason why this wheel is important is it opens the eyes of people that are in controlling relationships. They realize that they're not crazy, but they're in a crazy situation. Okay? So Patty and I are going to talk about each tactic in the wheel briefly, but it is important. Many women, that's when they have their kadas, and many men that are in controlling relationships. Wow. So, Patty, would you like to start?
I think Patty had to step out for a little
Okay.
bit. So if you want to
Okay.
go ahead, start that.
Coercive and threats. Strongful points. Get in your face points. Making or carrying out threats to do something to hurt the partner. That's usually very powerful because the person in the controlling relationship will remember a time when they threatened they were going to do this or that to them or other family members or even their animals. They remember that. So it only takes eye contact or a certain mannerism or whatever from the controller to the person that's in the abusive relationship. So it can be very powerful because we know what had happened or what could happen. Intimidation, it's on the same line. Making your partner afraid by using threats and looks and gestures. Destroying the part. Oh, yes, this is the partner's property. Very often when many people say, well, they're upset. It's, they don't have Their faculties about the controller I'm talking about. But I think it's so interesting. Whose possessions are they breaking? Are they, or do they have control or not? Oh, it looks like they're breaking the other person's possessions. So I think that's an interesting concept and one way to show intimidation. Another is gender privilege, treating the partner like a servant, abuse, acting like the king or queen of the castle, being the one to define the partner's roles, and making false allegations. They do. When you live with somebody, well, especially over a time span, and of course, depending on your past history of whether you're at healthy relationships or not, it's very important to redefine yourself because that is taken away from you. You have to concentrate on their needs, on what they want. So yes, falsely accusing you of things, acting like the king of the castle or the queen of the castle, whatever the case may be. Economic abuse. They're all important. Economic abuse. I see it time and time again. Is a disadvantage for the person that is being controlled. They may not know the income that's coming in. They may not be on the bank accounts. I could go on and on about that. They may get them a loan, whatever it may be in that particular case. They make the partner ask for money, not letting the partner have access to family income. It's very hard to leave a situation like that if you have no income or no access to money. Using children. We're going to talk a little bit more about that next week when the individual advocates talk about their role. But using children, that is a really difficult one for the non-offending parent. Making the partner feel guilty about the children, criticizing the partner in front of the children. That's a big one. And very often, it's very influential on the children. Sometimes they start treating their parent, the non-offending parent, like the abuser does. Telling the children the partner doesn't love them and interferes with visitation. I'm going to go back to isolation right now, controlling what he or she does, who the partner sees and talks to. They might monitor your phone calls, your visits. They very often they call you a dozen times a day to keep tabs on you. It's their way of keeping their power control over you, never knowing what to accept. Many people lose jobs because um, their work is interfered by their abusive person. Emotional abuse. This is a this is a biggie. Very often, our clients will tell us that physical abuse I can heal from, but the emotional leaves an impression. Earlier, I had said we lose ourselves, and this is often because of course, all the various tactics But the emotional abuse, it's ongoing. It chips away at our self-esteem. We lose who we are because we have to serve our partner and get their needs done. We take care of the children. We do so much. We lose who we are, and we're told that we'll never make it on our own. So that should give you an idea. And I hope that you found that helpful. And now we're going to go on to the next slide. Abuse. It's never the fault of the person being abused. Red flags of abuse. These are indicators. Whether you're in a controlling relationship right now and you learn about these indicators, these red flags, and you observe this going on in your current relationship, or you might see it going on even in some controlling friendships, etc. But red flags will also help you, give you some cues as to how controlling people behave and what they do and what their motives are. For example, wants to move too quickly. Oh my goodness, that can be so flattering initially. They really care. I'm not saying that every relationship that doesn't involved or married soon after they meet, but it is a trait in a controlling relationship. Um, we find it sometimes flattering and we think, okay, because we have to remember at that point, um, we're in love or infatuated with this person. So initially, seems very attentive and too good to be true because it is. We all have these hopes and dreams, um, and they're very good about knowing that and picking up on that. So that can be an indication. Does not honor your boundaries. That is a big one. It's a big one because very often when I started in this um, service providing, I never realized how people don't have boundaries, may not know what boundaries are. Um, so that is one of the things that we try to emphasize with victims or survivors of abuse, to learn to identify your values so that you can help setting up your boundaries. And this will help you decide what's important to you in various parts of your life. I'm not suggesting that this has to be done cautiously. You have to more or less start slowly addressing things that you feel is important to you, and certainly in an assertive way. Once all you to themselves, insist you stop seeing family and friends. That's the isolation. Excessively jealous and accuse you of being unfaithful. I watched a video one time and this woman was talking and she is saying, well, I was with my husband. We stopped at a red light. This guy next to me looked at me. I turned around and all of a sudden my husband is irate, accusing me of having an affair, of, flirting. all this type, just all that time sitting at a stop sign. Of course, it's done at other times too. Wants to know where you are all the time, calls, criticizes, or puts you down, says you're crazy, stupid, or fat. And then if we hear that enough, we start to internalize it. Takes no responsibility. There's a biggie. Or they might say, and I'll bring this up in a little bit. They might say, oh yeah, okay, I did this, but you did this, I did that. They don't take the responsibility. Or if they do, it may only be temporary. Blames the entire failure of previous relationships on the former partner, acts out of control with you, but can hold their composure around others, which is very difficult because a lot of family members or the community say, but he's such a nice person, or she's such a nice person. They take your money, does not treat you as an equal. Next slide. Emotional abuse. Again, I had mentioned it in the spokes of the wheel, but it is very devastating. Many individuals suffer from emotional abuse, which is no less destructive. Emotional abuse can eradicate your self-esteem and independence. Emotional abuse causes yelling, name-calling, blaming, may give you the silent treatment, shame you, or use any other action or behavior that makes you feel less than others. Isolation, intimidation, controlling behavior makes emotional abuse more intensified. The psycho abuse. In the 70s, a social worker by the name of Lenore Walker, she had many clients that were in controlling relationship, and she noticed a pattern. And this is her explanation of the cycle of abuse. If you go online, you're going to find other versions of this by other people. But the main thing is that very in the beginning, people, and like in most relationships, it may start out being respectful, loving, making you feel heard and valued, like you matter. The walking on eggshell stage. Here the tension is building in the relationship. At this time, you've been told if you would do this or that, things would be fine. And this is an interesting step because at this time, the victim or the survivor thinks, okay, yeah, I have been told if I do this or this, it won't go on. But the truth of the matter is, it's not about you. It's about them. It's about their insecurities. It's about their issue, not you. The blow up stage. The abuser reacts aggressively or with violence. It could be at different levels throughout a relationship. These cycles can happen fast or over a long period of time. Then we're back to like a honeymoon stage. And by that I mean a more, oh, you know, after the storm type of atmosphere. Okay, so they might apologize, or like I said before, but they're going to have that thought in there because they're not completely taking responsibility. The partner may give another chance, but eventually the cycle will occur again. Women's and Children's Horizons doesn't necessarily recommend couple counseling. certainly is up to the individuals. But I'll tell you one of the reasons is controllers are very manipulating, very good actors. And also, if you both go in, then the victim or the survivor may think, oh, wow, they're really want to try this so that we can have a good relationship. So that victim or survivor may disclose, thinking that, okay, he's going to be all right with this because we're working on this. Well, the controller may go along with it, or he might be very convincing and blaming you for what's going on. Many people in counseling are much more aware of the steps and the dynamics of domestic violence than a long time ago. But it's still important to be careful because when you walk out of that office, there might be elder pain. Okay? It's important to remember abuse usually escalates. The effects of abuse on victims. It's very often hard for individuals that are in controlling relationships to make eye contact. Sometimes when you see people that are in these relationships, you can note their self-esteem by the way they hold themselves or walk or if there's eye contact or not. I'm certainly not saying that those are always in effect on a person. Remember, this is awareness month. So that's what we're looking for. Seems afraid or anxious to please their partner. Talk. It's interesting if you're ever out in the community or in your own family or friendships or whatever. If you're observing a relationship, see whose needs are being met in that relationship. That is an interesting view. Gives you some idea. Show major personality changes from outgoing to withdrawing. May have digestive problems. Maybe we have a lot of health problems. Could be mental health problems, physical, and a lot of that, of course, is from being in a controlling relationship. But the other thing is, we're stuck. We don't feel we have a voice, and if we do, it doesn't always turn out well for us. We have a tendency of stuffing, and that stuffing will affect us down the line through various health problems. Many feel fearful, doubt their own sanity, lonely, and helpless. That is, like I said before, you're not crazy, but you're in a crazy situation. Making note of the effects of abuse on victims and discussing this, making this revelation to them, helps them connect the dots, um, helps them realize. Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about possible symptoms in the children. You can see yourself here, but next week that will be addressed, the effects, and how we try to help. But I will mention that in controlling relationships, when we are a victim or survivor, that does reflect on our parenting skills with our children. And I don't mean that the victim or abuser will harm the children in any way or directly. But what I'm saying is, when we're in a controlling relationship, we spend so much time on trying to appease our abuser that sometimes the children are not completely given the care that they may need. And I'm not talking about like neglect or that, but it's more about mom not totally, or dad, whoever the victim is, not totally being there because they have to take care of the needs of the abuser. And also with children, the parenting of the abuser certainly has an effect on the children. It might be that, they're observing what's going on. It might be that the abuser is saying, don't listen to your mom, blah, 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 not supporting each other. It could be an array of things, but like I said, we will address that next week. These aren't judgments, these are observations. Thank you. For some of us, we might think, oh yeah, the characteristics of a healthy relationship. Boy, oh boy, we don't know how important that is. We don't often realize what a healthy relationship is. Whether it's because we were in a family of origin that we didn't know it wasn't healthy, or there's so many other uh, variables that we don't understand. So it's important to know what a healthy relationship is. Each of those steps that we've been talking about today are important because it is about awareness. It is about learning. It is about starting to empower ourselves through resources and many other things. You can go on Google, everybody's friend, and look up the characteristics of a healthy relationship. But we do have, and these are all elements that we talk about with our clients. We invite growth in each other. We bring out positive qualities. Does not attempt to change or control the other person. It allows you to say how you feel at the time that you feel it. Okay. In reality, no relationship is going to have 100% of these. But if it's equality, if it's about respect, if it's about personal growth, if it's about having your individual life, certainly to some extent, and the other person having their individual life to some extent, and you have them together, but it's about respect and not downplaying, about being respected for who we are and affirmed. Thank you. I'm going to kind of end this with a safety plan. Now, a safety plan is one of the first things we do with people that come to us is talk about, are you safe? And what does that mean to be safe? Are you safe? Are, are you safe, or do you feel threatened, or whatever? There is no foolproof safety plan, but I think they're important because they bring us a plan, they bring us a way to help us to take more control, to want, like, for example, if you're at home, you know, this one says, increase my overall safety. I cannot control and avoid all violent situations, but I can increase my safety. Those are really increase my safety. I'm not going to go through all the particular details right now. This again is something that you can Google or you can, find. Um, we can talk to you about it, whatever you would need. But what it is about, for example, taking precautions by not going into a room that you possibly cannot get out of if you happen to know the violence is rising. It doesn't mean that you will always be able to do that. I kind of like to look at this as think about. Let's have some think about so that we can try to protect us. Okay. So you can tell people about where you're going. You can take different paths. If your controller um, knows where you usually go, you can have code words with your children, with your friends. If you call me and I say hello, hello twice or whatever it may be, that might be an indication, whatever you have worked out with the other person, that this means please call the police. Or could you come over? Or whatever you have decided among you, your plan, your safety plan, there is a code word. You can check with your neighbors and show pictures. I'm talking here in this instance. I'm kind of going back and forth. If you are out of a situation already, or if you are currently in a relationship, you can also get a restraining order, and we will be talking more about that. But the idea is to look for ways to empower yourself, to have some type of plan. And I think that is very important, and it certainly is one that we will definitely work with clients. Okay, thank you. I'd like to talk about, I would like everybody that chooses to participate, if you have any questions, I'm going to ask you to send them to my email, vsorensen@wchkenosha.org. Sorensen has two E's in it. You can ask a general question. You can ask a more personal question. The general questions I will address next week at the following webinar. So please, I think that's important to do. Okay. And then also next week we'll be talking about our mission statement, what we do. We will have a breakdown of each department and what we do, our service areas. Individual advocates will present on their area. So thank you, and thank you for joining us. We all need each other. Thank you.